What exactly lies inside a gun cartridge, the very projectile capable of killing a victim within mere seconds? Why does a bullet strike result in the death of animals or humans? Have you ever wondered if it is solely the physical impact of the bullet that causes death, or if there are toxic substances contained within the bullet itself that lead to a fatality? Have you ever considered what happens when a gun is fired into the open sky? Does the bullet eventually fall back down to earth, or does it simply vanish somewhere up above? What becomes of that bullet? Have you ever imagined that just 4 water-filled balloons could be sufficient to halt a bullet traveling at lightning speed? How does a silencer manage to muffle the loud report of a gun? In today's video, we will explore fascinating facts, intriguing details that you are likely hearing for the very first time in your life. Whenever we hear news regarding the arrest of terrorists, reports often state that a vast quantity of explosives, along with AK-47 assault rifles, countless bullets and cartridges were recovered from their possession. We frequently encounter these common terms, bullets and cartridges. However, most people remain unaware of how these components actually function. First and foremost, we must understand the mechanics of how the projectile used inside a gun operates. Most people assume that the entire assembly constitutes the bullet. They believe that the pointed, solid piece of metal at the tip is the sole entity referred to as a bullet, the object that, once fired, exits the gun barrel and pierces directly into a victim's body. However, this assumption is incorrect. The entire assembly is not in fact a bullet. While a solid metal projectile sits at the very front, the remainder of the assembly is known as the bullet casing. Yet many people mistakenly identify the entire unit as simply a bullet. In reality, the complete gun round is technically referred to as a cartridge. A cartridge consists of 3 distinct parts. The foremost section, the actual projectile, is what is correctly termed the bullet. It is this specific component that penetrates the target's body. Next comes the central section, known as the bullet casing, which is packed full of gunpowder. Located at the very base of the cartridge is a small pinpoint mechanism that is struck during the firing process. The instant the trigger is pulled, this specific pinpoint is struck. In technical terminology, this pinpoint mechanism is referred to as the primer. You now understand that the entire assembly is not merely a bullet, but is in fact a cartridge. But now the question arises, how exactly does this cartridge or bullet function? In essence, you can draw a parallel between a gunshot and a rocket. Much like the nose cone is the primary component of a rocket, while the rest of the structure merely accompanies it, carrying fuel to provide the necessary thrust, a similar mechanism applies to a bullet. The bullet casing contains a type of explosive substance commonly known as gunpowder. When the gun's trigger is pulled, the firing pin strikes a specific point, known as the primer. This action ignites the gunpowder within the bullet casing. The resulting explosion of the gunpowder generates a volume of high-pressure, superheated gas. The immense pressure exerted by this gas propels the bullet at high velocity, forcing it to shoot through the barrel. As the bullet exits the gun's barrel, the event closely resembles the uncorking of a champagne bottle. It is the explosive force of the gunpowder that compels the bullet to separate from its casing, sending it hurtling at high speed directly toward its intended target. By now, you surely understand why I drew a comparison between a bullet and a rocket. Just as fuel is combusted to generate the thrust that propels a rocket or missile skyward, striking the primer ignites the gunpowder to create a surge of high-pressure gas, a force that shoves the bullet forward, driving it toward its target. Meanwhile, the spent bullet casing falls away from the gun. Now, the question remains, why do people die from a gunshot wound? As you have likely gathered by now, the bullet casing itself serves no further purpose once fired. In reality, the bullet advances toward its target solely by virtue of the immense force propelling it. It is this very force that causes severe trauma to the victim's internal organs. As the bullet penetrates the body, it creates a wound through which blood begins to gush outward. In the majority of cases, death occurs because the victim's body loses an excessive amount of blood due to the gunshot injury. However, a truly dire situation arises when a bullet strikes critical, vulnerable areas such as the brain or the chest. These regions are extremely sensitive. If, by unfortunate chance, a bullet strikes one of these vital areas and disrupts blood circulation, saving the victim's life becomes nearly impossible. Death may ensue within a matter of minutes. In movies, we often see that when a victim is struck by a bullet in the chest or head, they die on the spot. However, a gunshot wound to any other part of the body typically does not result in death. For this very reason, police officers are trained, when necessary, to shoot criminals in the legs, thereby preventing them from escaping and allowing for their easy apprehension. No police officer is authorized to shoot directly at a criminal's chest or head. The context of encounter killings presents a somewhat different scenario. Now, the question arises, where does a bullet go when fired into the open sky? This is a subject that sparks curiosity in many. In our country, firearms are discharged in various contexts. The military opens fire to neutralize terrorists or enemy combatants, while police personnel use firearms to apprehend criminals. Often, shots are also fired during festive celebrations, known as celebratory firing. But when shots are fired into the sky, where do the bullets go? In reality, a bullet ascends into the open sky, reaching an altitude determined by the specific firearm's range. Subsequently, due to gravity, it begins its descent back toward the ground. The maximum altitude the bullet reaches depends on the quality and specifications of the firearm used. However, if a bullet descending happens to strike a person's body, it typically causes no harm. This is because the velocity the bullet possesses while ascending immediately after being fired diminishes significantly during its downward trajectory. Conversely, if a bullet ricochets off a hard object during the firing process and strikes a person, it can inflict severe injury. Such incidents have occurred frequently in the past, sometimes even resulting in fatalities. Now, consider another fascinating fact. Regardless of how high a bullet's velocity may be, a mere 4 or 5 water-filled balloons are sufficient to completely halt its momentum. As strange as it may sound, this is a verifiable reality. To demonstrate this through experimentation, experts have arranged a series of water-filled balloons in a linear sequence on a stand. A shot is then fired at the balloons. While observers might expect the bullet to pierce through and exit the entire series, the bullet's velocity drops significantly after penetrating just 3 balloons, and it comes to a complete standstill by the time it reaches the 4th one. You might be astonished to learn that the initial velocity of this bullet was a staggering 1,113 kilometers per hour. Upon striking the first balloon, its speed dropped to 690 kilometers per hour. Upon hitting the second, it fell to 373 kilometers per hour, and after the third, it stood at 109 kilometers per hour. Finally, upon impact with the 4th balloon, the bullet's velocity dropped to 0. Now, for the intriguing question, how does a silencer manage to muffle the sound produced by a firearm? Whenever we pull a gun's trigger, the gunpowder contained within the cartridge detonates, a process we have previously discussed. The combustion of this gunpowder generates a sudden surge of high-pressure gas. When this high-pressure gas is expelled through the confined space of the barrel alongside the bullet, it creates a loud, explosive sound. Let us now explore precisely how a silencer works to mitigate this noise. A silencer is attached to the very end of the barrel. In terms of size, it is considerably larger than the barrel, approximately 20 to 30 times its volume. Essentially, the interior of the silencer is fitted with a series of fins. As the high-pressure air comes in contact with the fins, it finds ample space to expand. Consequently, as the air expands, its pressure drops significantly. For this reason, the air pressure plummets from 3,000 psi to a mere 60 psi. As a result, the audible sound is drastically reduced. Fundamentally, a loud noise is generated during gunfire, making it easy to identify the shooter. Therefore, the silencer was invented specifically to facilitate covert assassinations. I hope you enjoyed this video. I have also created a video about the world's most powerful guns. You can watch it by clicking on the end screen. That brings us to the end of today's video. For now, I bid you farewell. I look forward to seeing you again in the next episode.